Now, right there at that moment, there were some husbands jotting down, wife must call me Lord. Like that. Exclamation point. Circle, circle. No, I'm not saying that. So let's see what 1 Peter teaches about submission. This is a longer passage, and this is why we want to really focus here. First thing that we see about submission is that it is voluntary and willing. Look again at verse 1 of 1 Peter 3. Likewise, wives, be subject to your own husbands, so that even if some do not obey the word, they may be won without a word. The Greek word there is in what is known as the middle voice. So the voice has to do with the direction of the action. So an active voice, I hit the ball. I did the action to the ball. Passive voice is the ball hit me. I stink at catching, so the ball hit me. Middle voice is I did it to myself. I hit myself with the ball because I'm a klutz. So middle voice is what this is. Wives, subject yourselves. So this is a willing, voluntary action on the part of the wife, not the external coercion of the husband. So this is not husbands subjugate your wives, it's wives subjugate, submit yourself. So here's the action, the command that is given to the wives. Secondly, submission is limited. Submit, be subject to your own husbands. So women are not being subjected to men in general, and certainly not to anyone else's husband. Now this does not mean that you disregard God, civil authorities, or spiritual authorities in your life. 1 Peter 2:13 and Hebrews 13:17 speak to those. And so you don't overlook those kind of things, but as far as other men, other husbands go, you're not subject to them. You're submitting to your own husband. This is the limit of it, and that frees you from having to submit to every man. So the limited submission frees you in many other regards. So let's look for another loophole here, because we see this in verse 1, and I've heard this way too many times from believing women. Number one, my husband is not a Christian, or number two, so along those lines, my husband is not a good Christian, so I don't really have to submit to him, right? Well, let's look carefully at those verses. Chapter 3, verse 1, likewise, be subject to your own husband, so that even if some do not obey the word, they may be won without a word by the conduct of their wives. Ladies, if you're in that position, it may be difficult, but it does not excuse you. If you were an unbeliever and you married an unbelieving husband and your situation has changed, there's that hope, that desire that your influence will win your husband over. But if you were a believing woman and you violated Scripture by being unequally yoked with an unbeliever, that still does not excuse you. You just get to sleep in the bed that you made. It's unfortunate, but God does not give you an out simply because your husband is not a good Christian in your mind. So let's eliminate that one and get to what Jesus really says to us. 1 Peter 3, here we see the lovely lady putting lipstick on a pig. And this could very well be Kim Kardashian. You've heard the expression, putting lipstick on a pig. Proverbs talks about that, like a gold ring in a pig's snout is a woman without discretion. And so this is why Scripture says, ladies, don't let your adorning be the external. Doesn't mean that you can't look nice, but it should not be your focus. You should not be vain and trying to maintain the external as your sense of value and worth. You should not have a full-on Instagram persona. And so don't let your adorning be the external, the braiding of your hair, the putting on of gold jewelry, or the clothing you wear. Beauty in a woman like without good judgment is like a gold ring in a pig's snout. That's Proverbs 11:22. Here's what God says is truly beautiful. The imperishable beauty. And this is kind of the thing that we see ad agencies spending billions of dollars on, is women waging war against declining beauty. And here's what God says. Let your adorning be the hidden person of the heart, with an imperishable beauty of a meek and quiet spirit, which in God's sight is very precious. Grab hold of that, ladies. The world is vain and empty and fake. It is filled with airbrushed images, Photoshop, images that make you feel like you're less than a person. But the reality is, if you will focus on inner beauty, it will shine outwardly. And you will find that this will not be a losing battle. It's imperishable, and it's very precious in the sight of God. Submission is beautiful. I don't think anyone would look at a horse like this one, ridden at a gallop, gun firing overhead. But what a picture of beauty this is when there is a rider and a horse that is submissive to the rider. It's magnificent. It's not pathetic. This is the imagery you should have in your mind about submission. Notice that word, meek and quiet spirit. Meekness is not weakness, ladies. Meekness is the word that the Greek historian used to describe Alexander the Great's war horse. Imagine the strength and power and fearlessness of a war horse. But it was described as meek. Meek means bridled strength. It was fully, all of that strength, all of that power was under Alexander the Great's gentlest touch. To go where Alexander wanted to go, to do what Alexander wanted to do, it shared the heart of the rider, and that is magnificent to behold. If you've never been around horses, you can't fully appreciate this. But when you get up to close to a horse, and you feel the size, and the strength, and the beauty, and you see that they yield to you, it is a wonderful and powerful thing. Right, Lauren? So that is the picture of submission. The horse, strong, powerful, graceful, beautiful, but totally yielded to the rider. This, ladies, is the picture of submission. This is the meek and quiet spirit. Not the cowed woman, not the broken down woman, but the woman in all of her strength who says, this is for my husband, and I yield it to him. That is a powerful woman. It's the Proverbs 31 woman. Magnificent, gracious, audacious, but yielded to her husband. And is vibrant, productive. Her children rise up and call her blessed. And her husband salutes her and honors her because she is strong and yields that strength to him and to the family. Wow. So here's a likewise that's there to open our eyes, to give us greater insight. This is the word that we often look in this passage to our own peril, because we try to redefine submission and the role of the wife and all that, because we're overlooking this simple little connective word at the very beginning, likewise. It's kind of like the word therefore. Whenever you see the therefore in Scripture, you need to ask what the therefore is there for. When there's a likewise, you should be asking yourself, what is coming before this that this is being compared to? So the likewise in 1 Peter 3 is taking us back to what he's already begun in 1 Peter 2. And by the way, if you're looking at it in the Greek, you'll notice that the be subject is actually a participle. And so it's not a full-on Greek verb imperative, but it has the force of imperative because it draws from a previous verb that is the imperative. And this is the word that's being continued in the thought throughout, and that starts all the way back in chapter 2, verse 13. So if you really want to understand what submission looks like, you've got to go back to chapter 2. And so in verse 13, here is the first use of the verb in the imperative, the command, be subject. And so it says, be subject for the Lord's sake to every human institution, whether it be an emperor, as supreme, or to governors as sent by him to punish those who do evil and to praise those who do good. So the first aspect of subjection is that we should be subject to our government and civil leaders. But then we see in verse 15, notice this, submission is God's will. Verse 15 right there in the middle, for this is the will of God. And this will of God is going to play out through the entire passage from verse 13 in chapter 2 all the way to verse 7 in chapter 3. So if you've ever wondered, what is the will of God for my life? Whenever you come to a passage like that in Scripture, there's no more question. This is God's will. So how should we subject? How should we live in relationship with each other? Here it is, black and white, plain and simple. This is the will of God. And so we move from subjection to civil authorities to now a conversation about subjection of servants to masters, employees to managers, lower rank to higher rank. And there's several things in there that are important to hear. Number one, be subject to your masters with all respect. That respect comes not just in the right words, but a congruity of the right tone and the right body language. You can be respectful in your words, but actually communicate disrespect, can't you? Ladies, you know this. Some of you have mastered the eye roll. Yes, Lord, whatever you want. Or the head bob. You know what I'm talking about. I know. You would never do this. Other ladies have. You've seen that in them, right? So you see that discontinuity, that incongruity between the body language, the tone, and the words. Scripture says all respect, that everything is united with respect.